Questions on an answer to an urgent question asked in the House of Commons on Tuesday 19th July on the Government's policy on interim payments for victims of the contaminated blood scandal.
My Lords, we're in a slightly strange position that the House hasn't heard the Minister's response, and I think it would be helpful if the House was to return to hearing an urgent statement repeated before we ask the questions on it. My Lords, if this House had heard the statement and weren't leaving the House, I think members would agree with me that it is embarrassingly unacceptable. And I pay tribute to the Haemophilia Society for the work they've undertaken, the support for those affected by contaminated blood. My Lords, the scale of this is staggering. Over 3,000 people have died and over 400 in the 5 years since the public inquiry was called. And I have to say, my Lords, the Government doesn't seem to be in any hurry to respond to the recommendations in the report that they received 4 months ago. Now, I want to press the Noble Lady, the Minister, on just one issue. She will be aware of the advice and the recommendations on compensation and interim payments. And she'll also understand the impact that delays in addressing this has had on the victims and their families. Many are dying while they are waiting for this to be resolved. The deadline for responses on the specific issue of interim payments is Friday, and Parliament is in recess. So can the Noble Lady Minister give an assurance that this won't be any excuse for delay? Can they tell the House what work is being planned now to address this and the other recommendations in the original report? And, if necessary, will she write to Noble Lords and others for a statement and an update during the recess?
My Lords, I'd like to join the Noble Lady in paying tribute to all those that have campaigned over many, many years on this issue, including the Noble Lady's honourable friend Diana Johnson MP, who asked this question in the other place and has been a great campaigner on the issue. Can I reassure Noble Lords that the Government is incredibly cognisant of the time pressure on this issue. We are working as fast as we can to work through the report that was delivered to the Government, Sir Robert's study, including his recommendation on interim payments. We do need to do that work thoroughly, but we are cognisant of the need to also do it as quickly as possible. Can I just reassure her on her question about the deadline for responses being when the House is in recess? That relates to the work of the inquiry. That's set independently from government, and that timetable is set independently from government. The government will consider any recommendations the inquiry makes on this matter. My friend in the other place has committed to updating MPs as this goes along. I'm sure that recess won't be a barrier to any updates that we would wish to make.
My Lords, my sister's son, a haemophiliac, died from contaminated blood, aged 35, leaving a 10-month-old baby daughter. And all victims have a terrible story to tell. And of course, the interim payments should be made immediately. But what eats away at my sister and others is their quest for the truth against a government cover-up that resulted in thousands of further infections and deaths that could have been prevented. When the inquiry finds there was a cover-up, as it clearly will, a cover-up that has been denied by every government over decades, will the Minister commit the government to come to both houses to publicly admit that cover-up and finally give all involved that longed-for admission of guilt?
The Noble Lady is absolutely right that it's extremely important that all those who have suffered so terribly can get the answers that they have spent decades waiting for. And the chair of the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, has made clear his determination to complete his work as quickly as thoroughness allows. Many of the infected will not live to see the inquiry's conclusions. When that work is complete, I'm sure that ministers will want to return to the House to reflect on the outcomes of the inquiry.
Considering introducing a similar system that was introduced for miners' compensation, which took away the need for individuals to actually take claims and speeded the process up. Have they looked at that as a potential model?
Well, my lords, the purpose of asking Sir Robert Francis QC to do his work on the compensation framework was to, whilst the inquiry is ongoing, not wait for the results of that inquiry to do some of the thinking in this area and look at the right approach for these specific circumstances. That work produced, I believe, 19 recommendations that the government's now working through and looking at closely.
My Lords, my Lords, we are, as the noble lady has pointed out, a little bit in the dark, not having had the statement repeated, but could my noble friend just please outline, is this a situation where it would be appropriate for a sort of a low-level interim payment just to be paid across the board, a modest amount, and obviously not reflecting the blame, but because time is of the essence here, clearly for people, paying out, say, a few tens of thousands would make an enormous difference to most families?
So one of Sir Robert's recommendations and the focus of the urgent question in the other place is that the government should consider making interim compensation payments to infected support scheme beneficiaries before a compensation scheme is established in the interests of speeding up justice and to give some level of assurance and security to those who may not live to see the end of the inquiry. And my honourable friend in the other place, the Minister for the Cabinet Office, and all colleagues in government are keenly aware of that reality. We are working carefully to consider the recommendations in that report, and we're making haste to address this as quickly and as thoroughly as possible.
My Lords, my noble friend keeps using the word quickly. Some of us were around when this terrible scandal broke many, many years ago, and I had heartrending stories in my own constituency surgery. We really do need to get things sorted out within this year at the very latest. Can she give an assurance that by the end of this year, everything will have been dealt with insofar as it can be?
The assurance that I can give, noble lords, is that we are extremely cognizant of the time pressures in this scenario, and we know that those infected and impacted and affected have been waiting for decades. So we are aware of the time pressures, and we are working as quickly as we can on the particular issue of the recommendations from Sir Robert's study. And of course the work of the inquiry continues, where I know the Chair has also made clear that he is aware of the need to conduct that inquiry as quickly as the thoroughness that is also needed allows for.
My Lord, we all agree that the victims of the infected blood scandal have waited far too long for justice, and interim payments are important. But as the noble lady has said, there are many other elements of the inquiry that are also important, not least the official recognition that it gives to people about what they've been through no fault of their own, and the chance for all those infected and affected to finally be heard. Would my noble friend the Minister agree that in this, Sir Brian Langstaff's inquiry is fulfilling an essential role that had been ignored by many governments for many decades previously?
Well, my noble friend is right, both in the nature of the tragedy for the people affected and the fact that they have waited far too long for the recognition of that. I hope that the process of starting the inquiry and going through the inquiry provides some of the recognition that they deserve. And I'm glad that it was my right honourable friend in the other place, Theresa May, that initiated the inquiry, but also that piece of work needs to conclude so that they can get the full results and the full truth of the matter of what went on at the time.